Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody who is watching has had a good weekend and stayed safe and well. Before I get into the crux of this morning, I wanted to take a moment to share my deepest and sincerest condolences with everybody in Nova Scotia and beyond who was impacted by the tragic events of yesterday. These are very difficult times, and I can't begin to imagine having to handle that event on top of everything else. So I have always been one that's prioritised actions above thoughts and prayers, but at this point in time I want us to all band together and to send our very best hopes and wishes to the people in those communities and families who are mourning, and to hope that they find some closure and some peace with time. So these are very unprecedented times for everybody, and they're very difficult, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you live or what you're doing. We're all trying to figure out how to adjust to all of this. And obviously, the people who have lost loved ones are bearing the brunt of this on everybody, for everybody. But even if we aren't dealing with the colossal loss of a person in our family or a close friend, it is still a difficult transition for everybody to make. And that's partly what prompted me to think about the conversation that we're going to have this morning. So I talked about it for quite a long time, actually, about whether we should talk about opportunities and change, because I'm quite sure that there are a lot of people out there for who that topic seems either at best irrelevant to them or at worst abhorrent, given what they're probably going through. But there are, for those of us who aren't dealing with the loss of a family member or a friend, still a transition to make, and we're seeing that. I'm seeing that in the people that I work with, in the clients that we have, in the way that organisations are changing, and it's something that we need to pay attention to, and it's something that we need to talk about. And I can see the impact of this change on people as we go through it. We've seen the shock that people had when COVID first started, and we couldn't believe it was real, and it couldn't be happening here, and it was something that was going to only happen in China, and it wasn't going to affect the rest of the world. We've seen the denial that followed. It's not going to be a big deal. Some countries were talking about it being a hoax and not actually being real. We've seen people say, it's just the flu, it's not going to be serious. And that was the denial stage of change. And we've seen anger and blame. We've seen people point fingers at China for being the perceptive originator of the virus. We've seen people point fingers at other people in their communities and challenge each other's way of doing things, and get angry at each other for our choices over going out to get groceries and what constitutes as essential and what doesn't. And we're seeing all of these stages of change manifest in our communities and in our families and in our organisations. And the stage that normally follows is one where people feel lost and they feel confused. And I'm seeing, thanks Amy, and I'm starting to see some of that stage now. People are asking questions. They're asking, what happens now? Where are we going from here? What do we do? How does this work? What do I do from here? And so to move forwards and to stay positive and to stay in a place where we're taking action, for those of us who are adjusting to, a change rather than a loss, we need to not just we need to recognise and acknowledge the loss that we have, and that things are no longer normal. But if we only stay talking about the loss, and we only stay talking about the things that we don't have anymore, and we stay focused on lamenting the things that we feel we have had taken away from us, it's incredibly hard to move forwards and find something new, and to be focused and to find our way through. And so we need to spend as much emphasis and time on trying to see the new, the opportunity, what could be, to help us keep moving forwards. And at this point that we get to in that change process, there is often opportunity. There is a new possibility. We have let go of things that existed before, right? We no longer have the same routines. I no longer have the same routine. I no longer have the same pace of life that I had before. I'm no longer running at the same speed. And so there's lots of things about my life that have changed that I might lament, but there's also possibility in that, and there's possibility in how I might shape what I want my future to be. And so it's the hope that comes from that. And I talked about hope in one of the last Facebooks that we did. Hope and power are the two things that we need with change. It's the hope that comes from thinking about the future, and it's the power that comes from taking control of our own future that allows us to move forwards. And like I said before, we don't talk about hope and power in organisations. We don't talk to people about hope. And, you know, Dr. Hagi said hope is not a strategy, and it's not a strategy, which is where power comes in. But we need to be thinking about the positive things as much as thinking about and recognising the things that we've lost. And so there's three things that I know that can help with that. That are worth talking about this morning, and they're simple and they're small, which is the best things that we can be doing right now, because no one has mental capacity for much of anything. The first is what we call reframing. It's a big word for basically choosing a different lens, choosing to think about things differently. So the one that's going around Facebook that I think is a great example right now is the mental shift from stuck at home to safe at home. That is a great example of reframing. And reframing is really about questioning the lens that you're taking on your situation and challenging yourself to think about it from a different perspective. And that sounds super easy, but we get stuck in our own rhythm and mindset around things, and we get stuck in our own idea of what true is, and we get stuck in our own idea of what's right in the world, and sometimes it can be hard to reframe or shake the way that we view things. So asking yourself the questions. If I was explaining my situation to a 6-year-old, what would I say? The likelihood is you wouldn't only talk about all the things that weren't working. You would find a way to balance that out for a child. If I was somebody else I know, what would they say about my situation? If I'm 6 months from now talking to my old self, what might I say? Right? So some of those questions and challenging of yourself to really take a step back and go, what am I stuck in right now? What perception of my current circumstances have I found myself in a rut over? And how could I view that differently than I did before? So in my case, I could get stuck on loss of business, right? So everyone's working from home now. Lots of our clients are doing things differently. A lot of what we did was face-to-face training that can't happen anymore. I could focus on all that was lost, or I could take a step back and say, what's the opportunity in that? What's the lens on that? How could I look at that differently? And even if the only benefit is I'm not running as fast as I was, there's a benefit in that to me. So how can I reframe my perspective on that situation? And if you can't do it on your own, that's what friends are for, right? Get your friends to poke you and challenge you on where you're stuck and the rut that you're in. If you find yourself repeating the same messages to yourself over and over again, your good friends are the ones that should be helping you get out of that rut. So reframing is the first useful thing that you can do. The second thing that shows up often at this stage is we get very black and white about things, and we start to see things in either or scenarios. So it's going to be this or it's going to be that. We're going to be out of quarantine by June or it's going to be never, right? And we start only being able to see things in kind of total polar opposites. And that is very rarely ever the case with change. And so challenging yourself to think about scenarios and probabilities is better, is healthier, will help you move further forwards. You know, it's rarely going to be a case of either or. There's going to be degrees and grades of how things can happen. And so thinking through, okay, what might that look like? How could that be challenged? What do I do? If it's this or this, what's the middle that might be an opportunity for me? How do I respond if that's what happens? And that can help give a greater sense of possibility, because there are multiple futures at play here. And it can also give a greater sense of power and control, right? So here's what I would do. If it's going to be this, if it's going to be that, it's going to be something in the middle. What are the actions that I can take? What's the preparation I want to make for me? What does that mean for me? Can give some of that sense of control, because we're starting to think about and prepare for ourselves. So that's the second thing. So the first thing is reframing, changing your lens or perception, and the second is around thinking about probabilities and not black and white either or. And the last thing, which, you know, I'll talk about a lot, and I think is really important regardless of whether you're going through a pandemic or not, is the power of gratitude and kindness. Now, I will have some clients when I say the power of gratitude who will probably roll their eyes at me because it sounds too wishy-washy for them and they don't love the terminology. But I'm going to keep saying the power of gratitude because it's important and because there's science behind it. So this is not some fluffy concept that somebody came up with to make more money for their motivational speaking gig. This is actually about how our brains are wired and what we do as people. And what you focus on, you get more of. Your brain is like a laser, right? Wherever you point it and what you take to look at, it will look at. And so if you spend your time focused on the things that you have lost or the things that you are sad over or lamenting, right? In terms of routine, I'm not talking about the loss of a person, that is a completely different journey. But in terms of like routines and, you know, losing clients or businesses or changes and that kind of stuff, if that's all we focus on and we only think about what we feel is bad, our brain goes looking for it. And it goes to find all those places that reinforce that things are bad, right? So what you look for, you get, right? So, and that's, again, I know that sounds super simple and it's not, right? Because when you feel bad, you just feel bad. But it's so important to try to find those places to find the good. So one of the things that we do, and we did long before the pandemic started, but it's really important now, is at the end of the day, we talk about the best bit of our day and we talk about all the things that we're grateful for in the day. And those things, right, which is also where the small acts of kindness come in. We're not talking about big stuff. We're not talking about like radically trying to change anything. We're talking about finding those small pockets and places that tell us things are okay and things are good and people are good and life is good, that actually trigger our brains to go find more of them. And so focusing on gratitude, but also being the person that creates those moments, right? The small acts of kindness that we can do for one another. Those things create a sense of positivity and a sense of hope and a sense of connectedness that we all need right now, and will help you and help your brain separate from the loss of the things that you feel you've had to let go of and start connecting to things that you can do more of that help move you forwards. So I love Amy, I love your comments. So, it is so important, Amy, and it's something that, you know, that and meditation, depending on who I'm talking to, people are like, I'm not sure that that's my kettle of fish, to use a Britishism, but it's backed up by science, it's backed up by how your brain works, and these are things that are important and help us to be more successful, more positive, more capable, more, you know, and do more of what we want. So those are my 3 suggestions as you find yourself moving out of what I call reacting phase, where we're in the shock, denial and anger, right? Get frustrated about things, and into, what am I doing now? Where am I going? What's all this about? What am I supposed to do now? How does this work? Reframe, challenge your assumptions. Where are you stuck on things? Where is your lens wonky and you need to have a new perspective or a new position? And if you can't get out of it yourself, go find a friend and ask them to challenge you on it. Try and stop thinking black and white and start thinking about probabilities and possibilities. What are all the things that could happen here? How can all of this work? And focus on what you appreciate, right? The gratitude piece and the kindness piece. Those 3 things can help with the mindset shift that moves us out of reacting and into more of a positive action around change and adjustment, and help us move forwards. So Christy has a question: are there techniques to help you move through the stages of grief quicker, or is there, let me see if I can open this, is it an organic process you have no control over? It's a great question. That whole reacting side of change, so we draw change, or what we call transition, going through change as a curve, right? So the reacting stage is the downward bit of the curve, and then we hit the bottom, which is kind of where we're ending up now, and then we come out the other side. That whole side of things is what we call an ending zone. So one of the biggest things that can help is to acknowledge it, right? So oftentimes what we try and do is cling to the old way or what we knew as normal, or just kind of put things on pause, because we'll get back to that. Acknowledging that life has changed and labeling how you feel can make a fundamental difference. And labeling is something I wish we taught people much earlier on in their lives. When you label an emotion, it actually triggers you as a human being to have more control over that emotion. It also works for other people, but it's very powerful when you do it for yourself. So acknowledging I'm angry, acknowledging I'm sad, acknowledging I'm devastated, whatever words work for you, saying them out loud to yourself, to somebody else, it doesn't matter. But taking the time to sit down and actually acknowledge and put a label on how you're feeling can help you have mastery over that feeling. And so then it becomes something that you're watching go by as an emotion and an experience, versus allowing it to consume you. So, that would be what I'd say off the top of my head. The other thing that is true regardless, which is difficult right now but really important, is the power of connection. So one of the things that makes you live longer, right, is not actually what you eat or how much exercise you do, although I know Sandy Bennett will tell me off for saying that to people. Exercise and food is important, but it's the power of social connection. It's the power of the relationships that we have. It's very difficult when you're doing physical distancing to have that community and sense of community around you, but people are very creative, and I'm seeing it, I'm living it right now in my happy hour virtual chats with my friends and my virtual workouts and everything else. Those connections, the conversations, the making your journey normal is really important. And as much as I'm going to talk about that curve, nobody else is you. Nobody else is going to live this the way you do. No one's going to have the same challenges you do. You're going to get stuck in places. You're going to have the feelings that you have. There is no right way to do this. So don't let anybody else's journey affect yours, right? If you are miserable and you want to be miserable for a day, that's fine. Like, do that. Just recognize if and where you're getting stuck and reach out to the people around you, or try reframing so that you can change that mentality. So acknowledging the change, labeling the emotions, and thinking about making sure you know if you're kind of moving forward through the curve can help. Is that good, Christy? Give me a thumbs up if that helps with your viewpoint. Any other questions from anybody on this piece of things? I'm really mindful when we have these conversations that I'm sharing tools and trips and things that I know from the whole world. I mean, we've been working in change for a long time, but this is a change like no other. Good, Christy. So I really want people to be okay with whatever their journey happens to be. And I've seen a lot of people on Facebook and other social media challenging the things that are out there around, like, oh, you should learn a new language, or you should make the most of this time. And there's people going like, oh, I barely know what day of the week it is, and I'm eating crisps for most of the day. Like, I can't possibly learn a new language. The point is, nobody's journey is yours through this. You need to find your own way through what you're doing. What everybody else is doing is good for them, and we should clap and cheer. Like, if somebody else has got the mental capacity to learn a new language right now, I'm thrilled for them. I absolutely am. I do not. Right? But that's okay, because my journey is not their journey. So making sure that we're thinking about the things that we need, that we're acknowledging how we feel, that we're recognizing when we get stuck, that we're connecting with the people that we need to. And as you move out of that reaction phase into this phase of, now what? Where do I go from here? Remembering that there are always possibilities, and there are always options, and there are always things that we can find and we can shape, that the hope of a positive future and the belief in our own power and our control is what can help us keep moving forwards. So those are my tips for this morning, coming after a very challenging weekend. The events of yesterday blew my mind. It's certainly not something that we expect to happen in the communities that we have in Canada, and my heart goes out to those people who are handling that on top of everything else. So stay connected to each other, stay safe, be well. And if there's anything we can do, or if you have any questions that you didn't have a chance to ask this morning, send them through to me or pick up the phone and give me a call. It's nice to hear people's voices and see people's faces, and I will share what I know and see if that's going to help you on your journey. Have a wonderful week. Be kind to each other, practice gratitude, and let people know if you're getting stuck. And I will see you again next Monday. If there's something you would like me to talk about, if there's something that you're finding challenging within the change or in your organisation or in your world about this whole new paradigm we're living, let me know and I'll happily weave that into what we talk about. So have a good week, everybody. I'm thinking of you all. Stay connected, stay safe, and I'll see you again on Monday. Take care.